Good timing again. Tonight we've got 4chan threads that are deeply disturbing. Material that's wrong in every sense. These posts matter. Hit like, subscribe, sound high, and let's start. In September 2021, at a private clinic outside Houston, I drove almost an hour to pick up my sister after a procedure. I thought the hardest part of the day would be getting her home safely while she was still groggy from the medication. I was wrong. The clinic was in a strip of buildings near a quiet road in the suburbs, the kind of place with a glass front door, fake plants in the lobby, and a parking lot that was mostly empty after lunch. My sister Sarah had chosen it because they had good reviews and the doctor had been recommended by someone at her job. She hated hospitals, so she wanted somewhere smaller. I got there around 2:30 in the afternoon. The waiting room smelled like coffee and disinfectant. A small TV above the chairs was playing a daytime talk show with the volume turned low. I checked my phone, answered a couple messages, and watched people come in and out for about 15 minutes before I walked to the front desk. The woman behind the counter looked up and smiled. Picking someone up? Yeah, my sister Sarah. She had a procedure earlier today. She typed something into the computer. Her smile faded a little. Sarah was already released. I laughed because I thought I had misunderstood. Released? Yes, her husband signed her out. I remember looking at her for a second because that sentence did not fit with anything I knew. Sarah had never been married. She had been dating someone for a while, but they had broken up months before this. Her husband? I asked, and the woman nodded. That's what the paperwork says. I figured there had to be some mistake. Maybe they had the wrong Sarah. Maybe another patient had the same first name. I pulled out my phone and showed her a picture. This is her. She's the one I'm here for. The woman looked at the screen, then back at me. Yes, that's her. That was the first moment I stopped thinking it was a normal mix-up. I asked where my sister was. The woman told me she had already left. She said a man had come in, showed identification, and signed the discharge forms. She said it was handled properly. I asked to see the paperwork. She hesitated. I don't think I can show you that. Why? Because you're not listed as the person who picked her up. I stood there trying to understand what I was hearing. I was the person Sarah told the clinic would get her. I had spoken with the staff on the phone 2 days earlier. I had given them my number. I knew the appointment time. I knew the doctor. But somehow I was now the stranger. I called Sarah's phone. It went straight to voicemail. I called again. Same thing. The front desk woman started looking uncomfortable. She kept glancing toward a hallway behind her. Not at me, past me. I turned around. There was a large window beside the waiting area that looked out toward the side parking lot. At first, I only saw a few cars and a delivery truck. Then I noticed a wheelchair near the back entrance. My sister was sitting in it. She was wearing the clothes I had dropped off for her that morning. Her head was tilted slightly to the side, and her eyes were half open. She looked awake, but barely. Her hands were resting on the blanket across her lap. Behind the wheelchair was a man wearing dark blue scrubs. I had never seen him before. He was pushing her toward a black van parked near the curb. I walked away from the desk before I even realized I had moved. Sarah. She didn't react. The man stopped. For a second, he looked more surprised than scared. Then he put his hand on the wheelchair handles and said, "Sir, you need to step back." I ignored him and went closer. "That's my sister." The man looked at me. "Are you family?" "Yes." "Do you have authorization?" I almost laughed again because I thought he was joking. "I brought her here. I am the person picking her up." He reached into his pocket and pulled out a folded piece of paper. "This is the authorization." He opened it and held it where I could see. My signature was at the bottom, or something that looked like it. I knew immediately it wasn't mine. The letters were too neat. My real signature always had a messy line at the end because I rushed through it. This one looked like someone had copied it from a form. The man watched my face. "Everything is in order." "No, it isn't." A few people inside the clinic had started looking through the glass. One older man sitting in the waiting room stood up. A woman near the reception desk pulled out her phone. The worker in the scrubs lowered his voice. "Don't make this difficult." That was the sentence that made me stop arguing and start acting. I went back to my car. The van was parked with its front facing the exit. If it moved, I knew I wouldn't be able to catch it. I got into my car, started the engine, and pulled directly in front of it. The driver honked. I didn't move. The man in scrubs walked over to my window. "Move your vehicle. Call the police." He stared at me. "You don't want to do that." I grabbed my phone and started recording. I pointed it at him, the van, and my sister sitting behind him. Then you should be fine with explaining this. More people were coming outside now. Someone from the clinic was telling everyone to go back inside. Nobody listened. The driver got out of the van. He was a different man than the one pushing the wheelchair. He looked around the parking lot, saw the phones, and immediately went back to the driver's seat. The worker grabbed the wheelchair handle. "Sarah, come on," I stepped between them. "Don't touch her." He reached for my arm, not hard enough to hurt me, but enough that I knew he was trying to move me aside. Then the older man from the waiting room shouted, "I got it on video." That changed the whole situation. The worker let go. I grabbed the wheelchair and pulled my sister away from him. Sarah made a small sound and opened her eyes. "What happened?" she whispered. "You're okay, we're leaving." The worker kept saying I was causing a scene. The clinic staff finally came outside and told him to step away. Nobody seemed to know what to say anymore. The driver started the van. I moved my car because I thought he was leaving and I didn't want him hitting me. I was wrong. He drove straight toward a parked SUV near the entrance. The crash wasn't huge, but it was loud. The plastic front bumper broke loose and fell onto the pavement. The driver didn't stop to check anything. He backed up, turned around, and drove out of the lot. By the time the police arrived, he was gone. The clinic gave a statement later that day. They said the man in scrubs was a temporary contractor who had been helping with patient transportation. They said there had been a failure in communication and that they were reviewing their procedures. The part that bothered me was when I asked who he was. They couldn't give me a clear answer. They had no employee file for him, no contractor paperwork, no schedule showing he was supposed to be there. The authorization form with my fake signature was also gone from their system. Sarah recovered at my house that night. I put her on the couch and made sure she drank some water before she slept. The living room smelled like the soup I heated up and the laundry detergent from the blanket I gave her. She remembered almost nothing after the procedure. She remembered a man telling her he was taking her to the car, but she thought it was someone from the clinic. The next morning I went through the video on my phone. The whole thing was there, including the moment the man showed me the paper. I paused on the signature several times. The more I looked at it, the stranger it seemed. I also noticed something I missed while it was happening. The driver never looked confused. He never asked who I was. He never asked what was going on. He just watched the worker handle me and waited. The clinic called me twice the next week. The first call was an apology. The second was someone asking if I still had the video from my phone. I told them I did. They didn't ask for a copy again. It was May 2024, during a maintenance job in the Mojave Desert that should have been a routine overnight call. I was working emergency tower inspections for a contractor that handled cell sites across Southern California. Most jobs were boring. A carrier would lose signal in a remote area, someone would check the equipment, climb the tower, replace a part, and drive back before sunrise. The site was about 40 miles east of Barstow, far enough from the highway that the last stretch was a dirt road between dry hills and empty patches of desert. The tower itself was a little over 100 meters tall. There was a small fenced area around it with a power cabinet, a backup generator, and a metal shed that smelled like dust and old oil. The call came in around 11 p.m. The network team had shut down the equipment remotely because of a fault, but they needed someone to check the antennas and cables. My coworker Mike was supposed to take the call with me, but he got pulled to another site after a storm knocked out a connection near Victorville. I remember Mike saying, "Don't let them send you up there alone if the wind picks up." I told him it would be quick. The forecast was clear and the tower was one I had worked on before. That was the part that made everything worse later. I knew the place. When I arrived, the sky was completely clear. There was no moon visible because of thin clouds moving over the desert, but the stars were bright. The truck engine was the loudest thing around after I parked. When I turned it off, I could hear the generator inside the fence clicking as it cooled down. I walked around the base first and checked the equipment. Nothing looked damaged. The cabinet lights were off like they should be. The antennas were quiet. I scanned the tower with my flashlight and started setting up my gear. The first strange thing was the phone. There was an old emergency handset attached near the top platform of the tower. It was there for climbers to call the ground crew if their radio failed. Those phones were basically useless at most sites. This one had been disconnected months earlier because the carrier replaced the system. I knew that because I had signed the work order. At 12:18 a.m., while I was putting on my harness, my service phone rang. I almost ignored it. The number on the screen was the site number. That did not make sense. The site phone was not connected anymore. The equipment was powered down. I answered. For a few seconds, I heard nothing except a little crackling noise. Then a man said, You made it up here faster than I thought. I looked around the fenced area. Nobody was there. I said, "Who is this?" The man did not answer right away. Then he said, "You're standing by the east anchor point." I looked down. I was standing exactly there. I walked away from the tower and looked around the dirt road. My flashlight moved across the fence, the shed, the rocks behind the site. Nothing. I figured someone from the network team was messing with me. Maybe someone had remote access to the old line or had patched into the phone system somehow. It was stupid, but it was the explanation that fit. I said, "If this is a joke, it's not funny." The voice sounded calm. "I can see your helmet." I stopped. My helmet camera was on. It was part of the safety equipment because supervisors reviewed climbs after serious jobs, but the camera feed was not public. Nobody outside the company should have access. I looked up at the tower. The top platform was a black shape against the sky. The voice continued, "You're going to check the south cable first. Don't do that." I did not move. "Why?" The man took a breath. "Because something is climbing behind you." I laughed once because I honestly thought I had heard him wrong. The tower was empty. I had checked the base. There was nowhere for anyone to hide. I looked at the ladder anyway. Nothing. I started climbing. I wish I could say I had some dramatic reason. I didn't. I was trying to prove to myself that there was a normal answer. Someone had found a way to scare a technician at a remote site, and I was not going to let a stranger on a phone stop me from doing my job. The metal ladder was cold through my gloves. Every few steps, the wind pushed against the tower and made the whole structure vibrate. The desert smelled like dry dirt and hot metal from the equipment boxes below. At about 30 meters up, the phone rang again. Same number. I answered while holding onto the ladder with one hand. "Stop climbing." I looked in. The ground was already far enough away that the truck looked like a toy. "How are you calling me?" The man ignored the question. "Look at the camera." I had a small screen on my wrist connected to my helmet feed. I pulled it up. The video showed the ladder below me. For a second, I saw nothing. Then the image shifted. There was movement. Someone was on the ladder beneath me. I froze. The camera angle was not great. It pointed slightly to the side, and the tower beams blocked parts of the view. But I could see a dark shape where a person should have been. I turned my head and looked down. The ladder was empty. My hand tightened around the rung. The voice said, "Don't look down again." I hated that I listened. I climbed faster. I reached the 50-meter platform and pulled myself onto it. I stayed there for a few seconds, trying to slow my breathing. The phone was still in my hand. "Who is behind me?" No answer. "Who is behind me?" The man finally spoke. "I don't know." That was worse than if he had lied. I checked the camera again. The screen showed the tower below me, the empty ladder, the cables, nothing moving. Then I heard it. A metal sound. A single step. The ladder under the platform moved. Not a lot, just enough. I grabbed the railing and looked down. Nothing. The phone rang again. This time I did not answer immediately. It stopped. Then it rang from the handset attached near the top of the tower. The one that was disconnected. The sound came from above me. I looked up. The emergency phone was hanging beside the highest platform, maybe 40 meters above. The receiver was moving slightly against the metal hook. I climbed. I know how that sounds. I know I should have gone down. But at that point, I needed to see what was happening. The phone was above me. The voice was above me. Whatever this was, it was not staying at the bottom of the tower. I reached the top section around 1 a.m. The wind was stronger there. My gloves had picked up a smell like rust from the ladder. I grabbed the emergency phone. It rang the second my hand touched it. I answered. The same voice said, "You're almost there." "Where?" "To the point where I can't help you." I looked down. The camera on my helmet showed the entire tower. The ladder was empty. Then a new image appeared. A person was climbing toward me. The camera showed someone moving up the structure. I could see the outline clearly, but when I looked down there was nothing. I backed away from the ladder. The voice said, "Get off the tower." I started moving toward the outside of the platform where the safety cable ran. The normal way down was the ladder, and I was not getting close to it. I clipped my backup line to the outside cable and lowered myself against the tower frame. My boot slipped once on the metal. Below me, the ladder moved. A lot harder this time. The whole tower gave a small shake. Something was coming up. I stayed pressed against the outside frame and watched the ladder. Nothing appeared. Then the steps below me bent, one after another. A weight was moving upward. There was no person there, no shape, just the metal bending. The phone was still hanging from my harness. The man on the line whispered, "It's above you." I looked up. Nothing. Then the emergency phone ripped away from its mount. The cable snapped. The phone fell. I watched it disappear into the darkness below. The weight on the ladder stopped. For maybe 10 seconds, nothing moved. Then the pressure disappeared. The tower became still. I waited until my arms were shaking before I started moving down. I reached the ground a little after 2 a.m. I did not check the site. I grabbed my gear and drove straight back. The company reviewed the helmet footage later. The video showed me climbing alone. There was no person on the ladder, no movement except me. They said the camera must have glitched. The phone was found in the dirt near the tower. The casing was cracked, but it still worked. The strange part was the call history. There was one incoming call listed from my own number. The date was May 18th, 2024. One day after I was already back home. In September 2021, I was working the night shift at a storage facility off East Sunset Road in Las Vegas. The place was the kind of business that looked empty after midnight. Rows of metal doors stretching behind a small office with a buzzing fluorescent light. I was alone most nights. My coworker Mike handled the morning hours, and Sarah, the manager, usually left around 6. The job was mostly boring. I checked payments, opened gates for late customers, and watched the cameras while drinking terrible coffee from the machine near the printer. The desert heat stayed trapped in the concrete even after dark. When I walked outside, I could smell dust and hot metal from the units that had been sitting in the sun all day. I had worked there for about 8 months, so I knew the usual customers. The people who moved in after work, the guy who stored old furniture, the woman who kept holiday decorations in 3 different units. Most of them were gone before closing, but our gate stayed open for tenants with codes until midnight. That night, I was finishing paperwork around 11:40 when the internal phone rang. It was the phone system we used for customers who were inside the property. The call display showed a unit number from the far end of the last row. "Storage office, how can I help you?" a man answered. His voice was quiet, almost like he was trying not to disturb someone. "Hey, I'm in row G. My door won't open all the way." I looked at the monitor. Row G was the farthest section from the office. It took almost 2 minutes to walk there. "What's the unit number?" There was a pause. "G42. I grabbed the flashlight from the desk. The cameras didn't cover every angle between the buildings, and sometimes doors got stuck because customers overloaded them. "Try pulling the handle down while you lift it," I said. "Sometimes the track catches." I already tried. He sounded annoyed but not angry. I told him I would be there in a minute. The walkout felt normal. That's the strange part. Nothing happened on the way there. I remember hearing my shoes hit the pavement and the sound of cars passing on the road outside the fence. I remember the cold air from the office disappearing as soon as I stepped away from the building. When I reached G42, the door was closed about halfway. The bottom was lifted a few inches, but it looked like something inside was blocking it. "Hello?" No answer. I knocked on the metal. "Sir?" Still nothing. I crouched down and looked through the opening. At first I thought I was seeing trash. Then I noticed a purse sitting on the floor. It was a woman's bag, brown leather. It was open, and a phone screen was glowing beside it. I stood up and called back toward the office, even though I was the only person there. "Hey, can you hear me?" Nothing. The phone inside the unit started ringing. Not my phone, the one on the ground. I stepped back. The call stopped after a few seconds. I remember thinking maybe the customer had dropped his girlfriend's stuff there, or maybe someone had left the bag behind and he was trying to help. There were a lot of normal explanations. Storage units attract random situations all the time. I called the office phone again. No answer. That bothered me more than the bag. I had just left the desk, but the office phone should have been ringing through the speakers outside. The system was old and loud. I moved closer to the door. "Sir, if you're inside, say something." A voice came from the next unit over. "Don't worry about it." I turned. The man standing near G43 was not the person I expected to see. He was maybe in his 40s, wearing a gray jacket and jeans. He had one hand resting against the storage door beside him. I hadn't heard him open it. "Are you the guy who called?" I asked. He looked at me for a second too long. "Yeah." I glanced back at G42. "Why is your stuff in there?" He didn't answer. I took one step toward the office. That was when he moved, not fast. That's what scared me later when I thought about it. He just stepped into the middle of the walkway like he had already decided where he wanted to stand. "You don't need to call anybody," he said. I stopped. "I need to get back to the office." He smiled a little. "You can just help me open it." I looked at the gap under G42 again. The purse was still there. The phone screen had gone dark. I noticed another thing. The unit next to him, G43, had a lock on the ground. not attached to the door, just sitting there. I reached for my radio. He saw it. The change in his face was small, but it happened. I turned around and walked back toward the office. He followed. I didn't run because I didn't want him to know I was scared. That sounds stupid now, but at the time I was trying to keep the situation normal. "Sir, stay where you are." He didn't respond. The office was still about 30 seconds away. Then I heard a metal door opening behind me. I looked back. He wasn't there. For a second I thought he had left. Then I saw him near the corner of the building between me and the office entrance. He had taken a different path through the rows. I was too far away from the gate and too close to him. The nearest open unit was G40. The door was raised about halfway, probably because someone had forgotten to close it earlier. I ran inside. He was already moving toward me. I pulled the door down as hard as I could. The metal shook when it hit the ground. There was a chain hanging inside for emergencies, and I wrapped both hands around it while I held the door closed. A second later, he grabbed the outside handle. "Open the door." I didn't answer. The storage walls were thin. I could hear him breathing. "You're making this worse." I held the chain tighter. Then I heard something that made my stomach drop. A drill. He had gone back to his unit or his car and returned with a power drill. The first hole came through the metal near the top corner, then another. The sound was awful inside that small space. Every time the drill started, I pressed myself against the door and tried not to move. He wasn't trying to break the whole door. He was looking for the latch. I don't know how long I stayed there. Maybe 10 minutes, maybe 20. My hands were shaking so badly that the chain kept slipping against my fingers. Then I heard him walk away. I waited. A few seconds passed. Then I heard the door beside me. G41. I looked at the wall between the units. Storage units in that building had thin metal dividers. They weren't made for security. They were just there to separate spaces. I started hitting the divider with my flashlight. It bent easier than I expected. I hit it again and again. The metal made a sharp popping sound. When I finally made an opening, I squeezed through into G41. My jacket got caught on a piece of metal, and I had to pull hard to get free. I didn't stop. I moved through the empty unit, climbed out, and ran toward the entrance between the rows. The gate was still open. I got to the road and called 911 from my phone. Police arrived within minutes. They found the man gone. They searched G42 first. The purse belonged to a woman who had been reported missing a few days earlier. The phone was hers. Then they opened G43. Inside, they found boxes of women's clothing. 3 different sets, according to the police. Items from 3 women who had disappeared in the area. They never found any bodies. They never told me exactly who the man was, or if they caught him. I had to give statements for weeks afterward, and every time they asked about the storage unit, they wanted the same details. The holes in the door, the drill, the chain in my hands. That's where we step back from the edge and catch our breath, almost. Thanks for being someone who listens all the way through. What story is going to haunt your quiet moments? Tell me below. There's a whole ocean of material waiting. Keep watching. See you soon.